The Book of Eli is a post-apocalyptic film featuring Denzel Washington, Gary Oldman, and Mila Kunis. In the film, Denzel is a lone traveler making his way to the West Coast with what is believed to be the last copy of the Holy Bible. He encounters a group of bandits led by a man named Carnegie, played by Gary Oldman, searching desperately for a copy of the Bible. Carnegie wants the Bible as a means to manipulate humanity and expand his empire. The film demonstrates incredible use of story writing, cinematography, production design, and sound design and editing. There are also a lot of great theological elements weaved into the story. The script was written by Gary Whitta. In an interview with Dylan Chester, Whitta explained that the story was written in only 1 week. It was really just a case of me being really consumed by the idea, and the only way to get it out was to write it out because it was a very simple story. The simplicity of the story in no way detracts from the creative genius of the film. In the opening scene, the audience is shown that the world has endured some form of collapse, though we are not given full details as to what has happened. We can gather there has been some kind of a war. Ash rains down from the sky as the camera slowly moves along the surface of the ground. The camera continues tracking as a pistol comes into view, followed by a lifeless hand, and finally a dead man lying on his back. Ominous music plays as the audience can audibly hear chunks of ash that land on the man's face. In the distance, a cat can be heard mewing. The cat growls and approaches the body and begins to eat it as the camera continues its course to the right. The camera finally rests on a man sitting in a hazmat suit with a bow and arrow drawn. The man's breathing can be heard as he slowly draws further back on the bow. When the cat whines, the man releases the arrow and instantly kills it. The cat was in plain view for several seconds, but the shot was not taken until after it vocalized, giving away its position. This is the first clue to the audience that the man is physically blind. However, this fact is not meant to be discovered by the audience until the final scene. This is one of the greatest writing elements of the story. After watching the film a second time, there are many instances where Eli's blindness is evident. This is an important part of the story and alone can fill an entire essay, but for time's sake, I'll just give a few examples. When Eli comes upon an abandoned vehicle, he stops and feels down the leg of the corpse that sits in the driver's seat, apparently looking for shoes. The feet are clearly visible, but Eli must feel for them. When he enters an abandoned shack, he slowly makes his way around the room, bumping into a dresser that would clearly be visible to a person with sight. He opens a closet door to reveal a body hanging from a noose. Eli does not initially look at the body as a person with sight would have done. Instead, he slowly reaches his hand towards the chest and then feels down to the feet, revealing that the man was wearing shoes. Eli takes the shoes from the body and puts them on. In the same scene, Eli pulls out a Bible that he's carrying and appears to be reading it. However, as the camera zooms into Eli's face, we see that his eyes are in fact closed. This is an important foreshadow as the Bible is written in Braille, a fact that is the final blow to the antagonist in the end. All of these examples are intentionally subtle and inconceivable to the audience upon first viewing. Eli's blindness is a creative part of his story, but his character flaw is equally fascinating and brings up many theological elements of the film. Eli recounts to Solera that, after the collapse, he heard a voice that led him to the Bible and instructed him to take it westward. The audience is not shown this incident, but we see his steadfastness to carry out his task on several occasions. Eli protects the Bible and will not allow anyone to touch it. It has become his sole purpose for existence. However, in the process, Eli has lost sight of what it truly means to live by the words of God. This is clearly visualized in the scene where the road bandits kill a couple on the road. Eli crouches behind a boulder and remains out of view. Instead of assisting the couple, he hides and repeats to himself, "Stay on the path. It's not your concern." It is not until later in the film, when he meets Solera, that he begins to recall what it means to be an adherent to the Word of God. Solera is sent to Eli's room by Carnegie. This is done at the protest of her mother, but Carnegie is determined to keep Eli in town and is attempting to entice him. He perceives that Eli is an educated man with incredible fighting skills and desires that Eli would help him search for the Bible. Eli refuses Solera's sexual proposition and instead shares a meal with her. Before eating, he makes her join him in prayer for the meal. Prayer is foreign to Solera, as is the Bible that she sees on Eli's bed. She asks him to read some of it to her. Being blind, Eli does not read it to her but recites Psalm 23 from memory in another scene. In an interview with Bonnie Laufer of Tribute Movies, Denzel Washington recounts that Solera is the one that rehumanizes Eli.
But really she's the one who rehumanizes him. I mean, he'd become in the name of God, he'd become this killing machine, and I don't think that was what he was meant to be.
The film reveals this character change after Carnegie wounds Eli and takes the Bible from him. Solera tells Eli that she did not think there was anything that would make him give up the book, that it was too important. Eli admits, "All the years I've been carrying it and reading it every day, I got so caught up with keeping it safe, I forgot to live by what I learned from it, to do for others more than you do for yourself." There are several other spiritual elements that could be spoken of, but for time, I will briefly touch on only two more. When Eli enters the bar in town, a man approaches him and attempts to pick a fight. The man was seen earlier in the film leading the group of bandits that killed the couple on the road. Eli attempts to defuse the situation, but when the man insists, Eli slams his face into the bar and towers over him and tells him,
"I know who you are. Murderer of innocent travelers on the road. You are going to be held to account for the things you've done. Do you know that? Do you?"
Eli is referencing the final judgment when Christ will return and deliver to all men the reward for the things that they've done in life. Another theological aesthetic in the film is what the Bible refers to as sowing and reaping. Proverbs 26:27 states that whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and he who rolls a stone will have it roll back on him. Throughout the film, Carnegie is seen as a cruel man, using people as expendable commodities in pursuit of his quest for finding what he desires. One would think that desiring to have the Word of God would be a noble endeavor, but Carnegie's longing is not for the life-giving qualities that the Bible contains. Instead, he desires to use its power to manipulate the population.
It's not a fucking book. It's a weapon. A weapon aimed right at the hearts and minds of the weak and the desperate. It will give us control of it.
As a result, Eli refuses to let Carnegie have the Bible that he carries. When Carnegie attempts to kill Eli and take it by force, Eli is miraculously protected from gunshots that should have hit him and killed him. It's not until several scenes later that Carnegie finally apprehends Eli and takes the Bible from him, wounding him and himself in the process. With the Bible in hand, Carnegie leaves Eli for dead and returns to town to have the local engineer pick the lock on the Bible. Eli, though mortally wounded, still continues his journey westward without the material Bible in his possession. When the engineer opens the Bible, Carnegie discovers that the pages are written in Braille. Dismayed, he attempts to force his wife Claudia, who herself is blind, to read the scriptures to him. She asks Carnegie about her daughter, Solera. Carnegie tells her that she chose to stay behind. Furious, Claudia slams her hands on the table and demands to know what he did to her. She feels the Bible beneath her hands and realizes that the pages are in Braille and begins to smile and tells Carnegie that she no longer knows how to read Braille. She then informs him that he has sacrificed too many men and the townspeople have taken over the bar downstairs, and he is too sick and feverish from his leg wound to do anything about it. Carnegie has lost control and will likely die as a result of his behavior. As great as the writing was for this film, it's equally matched in quality by its cinematography. In an interview with Panasonic, cinematographer Don Burgess spoke about the creative aesthetic of shooting for the Book of Eli. The storyline was based on a post-apocalyptic world, and the director wanted a very desaturated look. We felt the Red camera could accomplish that look. Burgess explained that the film was a turning point for him, and that he used the digital format to accomplish the desired look of the world. He also explained that he used the Panasonic Primos lenses to give the digital footage a filmic look. As Burgess stated, the visual setting of the world is very desaturated. At times it appears to be only a few steps away from black and white. This element helps immerse the viewer in the desolate environment of the film. Burgess's use of camera techniques also helped to tell the story in a creative way. One example is the scene where Eli encounters the hijackers by the overpass. After refusing to give the men his pack, Eli cuts off the hand of their leader. In shock and on his knees, the man cries out, "What are you standing around for? Kiss him." The men look around, puzzled by the command. Eli begins to step back into the shadows of the overpass and tells the men that he is in shock and meant to say, "Kill him." This act draws the men into the darkness that Eli has become accustomed to with his blindness. In the shadows of the overpass, Eli kills his attackers with relative ease. The entire scene is captured from one slow zooming camera angle that shows the attack through dark silhouettes against a brightly clouded sky. There are many creative scenes like this in the film that, in their own way, help support the narrative. In company with outstanding cinematography, the film also presents creative editing to tell parts of the story. This can be seen throughout the film, but one case in particular that demonstrates the art of storytelling through editing can be seen near the end. The transition between the climactic scenes with Carnegie at his bar and Eli at Alcatraz reveal the contrast between two characters' concluding story arc. Carnegie, after discovering that he has lost everything, slumps down onto the floor as the camera zooms in on his face. The scene fades to black and fades back in with a close-up on Eli's face. Eli is being shaved and cared for so that he can deliver the Bible to the community leader that is trying to restore society. Eli has succeeded in his mission while Carnegie has failed and faces certain impending doom. This small detail in editing assists the story by tying the two concluding scenes together. The Book of Eli takes place in a post-apocalyptic world with wide-open spaces, crumbling infrastructure, and vehicles in the last stages of usefulness. This creates an interesting setting for audio. Sound design was the responsibility of Stephen D. Williams and Eric Norris, and was done in a way that supports the story. The motorcycles that were driven by the bandits, for example, played an important role. Eli first encountered the sound of these bikes when the bandits killed a couple on the road. In the following scene, when Eli is at the pawn shop in town, he hears the bikes roll into town and identifies that they were the same bikes that he heard before. This is how Eli was able to identify the leader when he was confronted at the bar. To give the bikes their own identity, William and Norris spent a fair amount of time tweaking the sound of the bike engines. "We took the kickstart bikes to the desert and fiddled with the timing to make them run rough," explains Norris. "However, once you fiddle with the timing, you can't start it. What we had to do was leave the cover off the points, start the bikes, and then retard the timing as far as we could and then drive it off, coughing and missing, giving the unique character we were looking for." The final designed element was composed of many layers, including a scraping sound along with the motorcycles that were field recorded. The rough sound of the motorcycles made the audio believable in a way that stock audio never could. More importantly, the sound of the bikes gave Eli the needed information to identify the group's leader when he was approached in the bar scene. Without this detail, the scene would not have made sense, since Eli was blind and could not see the men on the road. For a film in this setting, production design plays a vital role. The surrounding environment, the costumes, and the weapons all have to appear as though they would exist in the film's world. In a behind-the-scenes video by Don Draper, members of the cast and crew describe the process of creating Eli's weaponry. According to director Albert Hughes, the original script had Eli carrying a samurai sword, but all agreed that the weapon had been used too many times in other films. The final design for Eli's weapon was a mashup of several ideas, including a samurai, a machete, and a butcher knife that the directors had found with holes in the back of the blade. A samurai sword, though incredibly sharp and swift, is not known for its high durability. The design for Eli's weapon added to the strong, rough, and road-worn character of Eli. The Book of Eli is a fantastic film with so many great production elements. It began with a well-written script, but required the expertise from various film concentrations to make it what it is today. The film will forever be remembered for its top-notch production, but it will also serve as a great example to filmmakers that hope to visualize theological concepts on screen.